The ghost dentist. The clinic that wasn't there. Liam hated going to the dentist. The drills, the smell of antiseptic, the cold, clinical lights. It all made his skin crawl. But after weeks of sharp pain in his molar, he had no choice. His usual dentist was booked for the next 3 months, so he had to look elsewhere. That's when he saw the flyer. It was simple. Dr. Adrian Voss, painless, affordable dentistry. Walk-ins welcome. There was an address, a phone number, and a website. The website looked legitimate, full of glowing reviews. The best experience I've ever had. Dr. Voss is a miracle worker. I was in and out in under an hour, and my pain was gone. Liam booked an appointment. The clinic was in an old part of town, down a street he had never noticed before. It didn't look like much, just a narrow brick building sandwiched between an abandoned bookstore and a boarded-up tailor shop. The sign above the door read Voss Dental. The windows were clean, but the inside was dimly lit. When he stepped inside, the smell hit him first. Not the usual sharp, sterile scent of a dentist's office, but something old, like dust and something metallic. A woman sat behind the reception desk, staring blankly at a computer screen. Her name tag read, Elena. I have an appointment?" Liam said hesitantly. She looked up, her eyes slightly unfocused. "Dr. Voss will see you now." Liam expected to wait at least a few minutes, but Elena led him straight into the examination room. Dr. Adrian Voss was already there, standing by the chair. He was tall, thin, and pale, with deep-set eyes that didn't quite match his polite smile. His white coat looked pristine, almost too pristine. "Liam, welcome," he said, his voice smooth and oddly calming. "Let's take care of that tooth, shall we?" Liam lay back in the chair, his heart hammering. But as Dr. Voss worked, the pain melted away. The drill didn't hurt. The needles didn't sting. It was pleasant, too pleasant. By the time the procedure was done, Liam felt lightheaded, almost euphoric. "That should do it," Dr. Voss said, patting his shoulder. Liam sat up, blinking. "That's it," Dr. Voss chuckled. "Quick and painless, just as promised." Liam walked out feeling amazing. No pain, no discomfort, nothing. That night, he slept like a baby. The next morning, he checked his mouth in the mirror. His tooth was fixed, but something felt off. His gums were pale, almost gray. The longer he stared, the more uneasy he became. He tried to call the clinic, but the number was disconnected. Confused, he decided to drive back. But when he reached the street, Voss Dental was gone. The narrow brick building was empty, dust-covered, abandoned. The windows were shattered, the door locked with rusted chains. It had been closed for decades. Liam's stomach churned. He pulled out his phone, searching for the website. Nothing. It didn't exist. Had he imagined it? No. He could still feel the smooth surface of his newly repaired tooth. He had been there, hadn't he? Over the next few days, things got worse. His appetite vanished. His reflection seemed wrong. His skin grew paler, his eyes darker. He started waking up at night with the taste of metal in his mouth. And the dreams of Dr. Voss standing over him, whispering things he couldn't understand. One night, he woke up choking. Running to the bathroom, he coughed hard until something landed in the sink with a sickening clink. A tooth, one of his own. It didn't even hurt. Terrified, Liam searched online for Dr. Adrian Voss. He found an article. Local dentist Adrian Voss disappeared in 1974 after multiple patients claimed he performed procedures on them without anesthesia, but none felt any pain. Days after their visits, they grew sick, their bodies deteriorating. Some vanished entirely. Others were found drained, their mouths empty, their teeth removed with surgical precision. His clinic was abandoned after a fire destroyed most of the building. No body was ever found. Liam stared at the screen, his hands trembling. He wasn't the only one. More people had posted in online forums, people who had gone to a Dr. Voss in different cities, different decades. Always painless, always disappearing afterward. And then, one by one, the people who had visited him started disappearing too. Liam didn't go outside anymore. His skin had turned gray. His teeth were loose. His reflection barely looked human. The worst part? He wasn't scared anymore. He understood now. Dr. Voss had given him something, or taken something, and soon it would be his turn. One night, as he stood in the bathroom, staring at the last of his teeth falling from his mouth, he heard a voice behind him. Smooth, calming. "Are you ready, Liam?" He turned. Dr. Voss was there, smiling. Liam smiled back, and the next morning he was gone, just like the others, just like he was meant to be. The disappearance of Liam barely made the news. Another young man gone without a trace, another unsolved case. The police asked questions, but they had no leads. His apartment was untouched. His car was still parked outside. It was as if he had simply walked away from his life. Except for one thing. His bathroom mirror had a message scrawled into the fogged glass, as if written by an invisible hand. Painless. Always painless. A month later, the flyer appeared again. Dr. Adrian Voss, painless, affordable dentistry. Walk-ins welcome. This time it was in a different city, and the first new patient was a woman named Claire. Claire Miller had never liked dentists. Ever since she was a child, the mere thought of someone poking around in her mouth made her nauseous. But after weeks of unbearable pain in her back molars, she had no choice. Her insurance was a joke. Most clinics charged a fortune. Then she found the flyer. The address was close. Too close. A street she walked down every day. But she could swear there had never been a dental office there before. When she arrived, the place looked odd, like it had been there for years but also just appeared overnight. The windows were clean but seemed strangely dark inside. The sign above the door read Voss Dental. Something about it made her hesitate. Then the pain in her jaw pulsed, sharp and unrelenting. She stepped inside. The waiting room was empty, save for a receptionist. "Welcome to Voss Dental," the woman said, her voice flat. Her name tag read, Elena. Claire frowned. Something was off about her. Her skin looked almost translucent under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes were dull, unfocused. I have an appointment?" Claire said. Elena just nodded. "Dr. Voss will see you now. No forms. No insurance questions. Just an immediate invitation inside." The exam room was freezing. A single chair in the center, an old-fashioned drill on the tray beside it. And standing next to it, smiling too widely, was Dr. Adrian Voss. "Claire," he said smoothly, "let's take care of that pain." His voice was calming. Too calming. It made her body relax before her mind could argue. Claire hesitated, but the throbbing in her jaw was unbearable. She sat down. Dr. Voss leaned over her, his fingers unnaturally cold as he adjusted the light. "Don't worry," he whispered. "You won't feel a thing." He was right. The procedure was painless. More than painless, it was soothing. A dreamlike sensation washed over her as he worked. His hands impossibly precise, his movements eerily graceful. When it was over, Claire sat up, blinking. She felt incredible. No pain, no discomfort. "That's it?" she asked. Dr. Voss smiled. "That's it." She walked out of the clinic feeling lighter than she had in weeks. But as soon as she got home, the unease settled in. The clinic had no website. The number on the flyer was disconnected. And when she returned the next day, Voss Dental was gone. The building was empty, dust-covered, boarded up as if it had been abandoned for years. Claire's stomach twisted. She checked her mouth in the mirror. The tooth was fixed, but her gums looked pale, too pale. And then, that night, she started to dream. Claire wasn't the only one. She searched online, finding obscure forum threads about Dr. Voss. People across the country had visited him, some as recently as a few months ago, others decades before. Each story was the same. No pain, a disappearing clinic, a slow transformation, and then they vanished. Claire's hands trembled as she typed a message. "I think I went to Voss Dental. I don't know what's happening to me. Please, someone respond." Minutes later, a reply came. "Get out of your house. Right now." Her blood ran cold. Then a second message appeared. He's already there. A shadow moved in the reflection of her laptop screen. Claire turned, and Dr. Voss was standing in the doorway, smiling. The ghost dentist. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Dr. Voss stood in the doorway, his white coat spotless, his smile too wide, too perfect. The light from the hallway didn't seem to touch him, as if he weren't entirely there. "Claire," he said smoothly, "it's time for your follow-up." Her body refused to move. She wanted to scream, to run, but her limbs felt sluggish, her mind foggy. "No," she finally managed to whisper. Dr. Voss took a step closer, his shoes making no sound on the wooden floor. Now, he murmured. "You don't want your treatment to be incomplete." A sharp pulse of pain shot through her gums. Claire gasped, clutching her face. Something shifted beneath her skin, deep in her jaw. "What did you do to me?" she choked out. Dr. Voss's smile never wavered. "You're becoming like the others. But don't worry, you won't feel a thing." Claire's survival instincts kicked in. She bolted, shoving past him, running for the front door. But as soon as she reached for the handle, she was back in the chair. Her heart pounded. The walls around her were no longer her apartment. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic and something rotten. Voss Dental. No, I left." Dr. Voss loomed over her. His eyes were darker now, endless pits of shadow. "You never left, Claire." The chair's restraints snapped shut around her wrists. Her screams echoed through the empty clinic as Dr. Voss reached for his instruments. The drill whirred to life. "Please," she sobbed. He pressed a gloved finger to her lips. "Shoo, this won't hurt at all." The drill lowered toward her mouth. Claire's vision blurred. And then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, everything was quiet. The pain was gone. She was standing in the waiting room of Voss Dental. The old computer screen flickered in front of her. A name tag rested on the desk. Elena. Claire stared at it. Then, slowly, she lifted a trembling hand to her mouth. Her teeth were gone. Her reflection in the dark computer screen showed hollow eyes, skin so pale it was almost translucent. She tried to scream, but no sound came. Behind her, a familiar voice whispered, "Welcome to the team, Claire." Dr. Voss, smiling, waiting for the next patient. The ghost dentist. The flyer appeared again. This time, it landed in the hands of Ethan Carter, a struggling college student with no dental insurance and a throbbing toothache that made it impossible to concentrate on his finals. The clinic was close, too close. A street he walked past every day, yet he swore he had never seen Voss Dental before. The clean windows, the dim interior, the outdated but somehow welcoming sign above the door. The moment he stepped inside, a strange chill settled in his bones. Behind the front desk sat a woman. Her name tag read Elena, but something about her wasn't right. Her skin was unnaturally smooth, her expression too vacant. Her lips parted in a mechanical smile. "Dr. Voss will see you now," she said, her voice hollow. Ethan hesitated. Something inside him screamed run. But then the pain in his jaw flared again. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. The exam room was freezing, the air stale. The single dentist's chair in the center looked modern, pristine, but the rest of the room felt old. Dr. Adrian Voss stood beside it, smiling. He was tall, thin, his skin nearly translucent under the harsh lights. His white coat was crisp, untouched by time. His eyes were too dark, as if something deeper lurked beneath. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Let's take care of that pain." Ethan swallowed hard. What about x-rays? Do you take insurance?" Dr. Voss chuckled. "No need. I see everything I need to." Before Ethan could question him, his body relaxed. His limbs felt light, his mind strangely calm. His mouth opened on its own. "What the hell is happening?" But the words never left his lips. The drill whirred. The light above grew blinding. And then, darkness. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He was standing in the waiting room. The old computer flickered beside him. Something cold rested against his chest. He looked down. A name tag, Ethan. His breath hitched. His hands trembled as he lifted them to his mouth. His teeth were gone. He turned to the dark reflection in the computer screen. Hollow eyes stared back at him. He tried to scream, but he had no voice. Behind him, a calm voice whispered, "Welcome to the team, Ethan." Dr. Voss, smiling, waiting for the next patient. The ghost dentist. Ethan stood frozen in front of the computer screen, staring at his reflection. If it even was his anymore. His skin was pale, almost translucent. His lips parted, but no voice came out. Inside his mouth, where his teeth had once been, there was nothing. Not just gums, nothing. A void. His fingers trembled as he reached up, trying to touch it. But the second his fingertips brushed the emptiness, a horrible coldness seeped through his body. Memories flickered. His dorm, his friends, his life before Voss Dental. It all felt distant, like it had never belonged to him. Behind him, Dr. Voss stood tall, adjusting his spotless white coat. His smile was too perfect, too wide. "You'll get used to it," he said softly. Ethan turned, panic rising in his hollow chest. He tried to move, to run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The door to the exam room opened, and Claire stepped out. She wore a matching white coat, her expression eerily blank. But her eyes were black pits of nothingness. "Welcome, Ethan," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. He tried to scream. Nothing came out. Days passed, or maybe it was years. Time didn't exist here. Ethan sat behind the reception desk, staring at the flickering screen, his fingers resting on the cold keyboard. A name tag glinted under the dim light. Ethan. He didn't remember putting it on, didn't remember sitting down, didn't remember choosing this. But he was here, and he would be here until the next one came. The door creaked open. A new patient walked in, a young woman with tired eyes and a hand pressed to her swollen jaw. She looked around hesitantly. Is this Dr. Voss's office?" Ethan tried to warn her, tried to shake his head, but his body moved on its own. His lips curled into a polite smile. "Dr. Voss will see you now." His voice was hollow, empty, like the rest of him. And as the woman disappeared into the exam room, Ethan knew. One day she would be sitting where he was, and he would be gone, just like Claire, just like Elena, just like everyone before him. Dr. Voss only kept them for a while. Then he took something more, and when the time came, Ethan would vanish, just like the others, just like he was meant to. The cycle repeated, again and again. A patient would come in searching for relief. They would sit in the chair. Dr. Voss would take what he needed, and a new name tag would appear. One by one, the others faded. Elena, Claire, Ethan. Their bodies remained, standing behind the desk, moving through the clinic like empty puppets. But their souls, whatever was left of them, had been swallowed by the void. And soon there was only one left. One evening, the door opened for the last time. A man stepped inside. He was older, his face lined with exhaustion, his eyes sharp and knowing. He carried something under his arm, a thick leather-bound book. Dr. Voss looked up from the exam chair, smiling. "Welcome," he said. "Do you have an appointment?" The man stepped forward, his fingers tightening around the book. "I know what you are," he said quietly. Dr. Voss's smile didn't falter, but the air in the room shifted. The lights flickered, the walls groaned. "And what, exactly, do you think I am?" Voss asked. The man opened the book. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them, stretching back over a century. All patients of Voss Dental. All vanished. "You were never human," the man whispered. "You feed on them, on their pain, their fear, their very existence." Dr. Voss chuckled softly. "And yet they keep coming to me," he said, "because I give them what they want." He leaned closer, his eyes black as the void. "I take the pain away." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small glass vial filled with dark, swirling liquid. "The last patient you took," he said. Was my brother. For the first time, Dr. Voss's smile faded. The man uncorked the vial. A horrible, shrieking sound filled the clinic. The walls began to rot, the furniture collapsed into dust. The air itself trembled as the darkness within Voss began to unravel. The glass in the windows shattered. The receptionist's desk crumbled into ash. The name tags, Elena, Claire, Ethan, all disappeared. And then, Dr. Voss began to dissolve. His form flickered, unraveling into nothingness. His wide, perfect smile stretching unnaturally as he let out a long, rattling breath. For the first time in over 100 years, Voss Dental was truly gone. The next morning, the building was nothing but rubble. The man stood outside, gripping the leather book in his hands. The names inside no longer glowed with eerie energy. They were free. But as he turned to leave, something in the dust caught his eye. A single object remained untouched. Pristine white name tag. He bent down and picked it up. The engraving was fresh. Dr. Adrian Voss. The wind howled through the empty street. And somewhere far away, a new flyer appeared. Painless. Always painless.